Hello, this is Michael Hexter. Welcome to Politics 2100 here on YouTube. This episode I'm calling Democratic Rule of Law, parentheses, not law and order, close parentheses, is the basis of civil liberty, real social democracy slash socialism. So this is a video to explain the concept of rule of law, especially democratic rule of law, and how important it is. And this is something that I have discovered in my own political development late in life, in part because, or later, more recently, I mean, after many decades of being active in politics, because we are in a period of time when we're seeing the potential loss of democratic rule of law. And in seeing what we might lose, I realize that this has been a basis of really any positive social development, or at least the outcome, or one of the ground conditions for any positive outcome for social progress. And in this case, I'm including real social democracy and socialism as being positive, humane societies. And I'm leaving that open in terms of what they actually, how they actually would be structured. There's a broad range of possibilities in that area, and we haven't really determined, in my opinion, what the best, most humane society would look like. But anyway, it does seem that really a democratic rule of law is needs to be part of that. And so, and the reason, the threat is obviously the threat of fascism and or authoritarianism, and that how the contrast between authoritarianism and either now I've used the word liberalism more recently, but I'm also talking about left of liberalism. And I am maybe answering a question from a previous episode and saying, I think that literally social democrats and socialists need to extend and restructure parts of liberalism rather than throwing the whole thing out. And even though there are parts of liberalism and parts of things that are associated with it, including exploitative capitalism and imperialist exploitation of peripheral countries and so forth and so on, that are to be gotten rid of, and in our future more stable and more egalitarian world system that we hope to achieve eventually. But anyway, and I'm speaking for myself when I say we, but many people seem to want to have something like that when they consider themselves to be progressive and left and so forth and so on. So anyway, this democratic rule of law sounds kind of like, and that's why I say not law and order. It sounds like law and order. And law and order has come to mean is actually the casual breaking of laws by law enforcement and by government leaders to impose order on a population in revolt, or just unruly, or just high levels of social unrest and maybe criminality, petty criminality of different kinds. But anyway, and so law and order is come to mean the imposition by governments and by law enforcement of a rigid order. And it often means the breaking of the actual laws that constrain, among other things, law enforcement, like due process and so forth and so on, in favor of due process of law, in favor of simply just beating people up and intimidating them and and playing the bully, literally. So rule of law and democratic rule of law is not that, and it's unfortunate that some people might associate with them with one with the other. And some of this is also, this is a sidebar to some degree. There is an anarchist strain in parts of the left and also not in parts of the right wing in the United States as well, that seems to think that the optimal society is one that without government whatsoever and without anything that is a positive embrace of something like what I'm calling rule of law, or the embrace of the existence of a state that has, laws and law enforcement and so forth and so on, that violates these high principles that the anarchoid and anarchist communities have, and even those who do not call themselves that, but who nevertheless are swept up in the ideal of sort of autonomous individuals being able to decide their own fates without the help of a state and without the imposition of laws and so forth and so on, for various reasons. So anyway, democratic rule of law, though, is the idea that we can't really get along with each other and without some kind of framework of law which we've agreed upon, and also that it's democratic in that we have mechanisms by which we can change those laws, by petition, by protest, by even can be even a revolution of some kind, though that would be a breach in the rule of law, because but anyway, but most often that's really sort of less common and less likely, and that's not a scenario that I am preaching. But democratic rule of law, it says that we need mechanisms to change the laws if they are not conforming to the reality and do not serve the popular interest in terms of their own popular welfare. It seems it's just a stale imposition of some old ideas written in law books or written in the Constitution somewhere. And so, but democratic rule of law is I think of it myself as an ethical orientation that surrounds a legal system. So it's agreements that people have to abide by laws and also to decide to change the laws based on optimally nonviolent principles, and to prioritize discussion in political realms and also in educational realms, but also eventually leading to political change potentially, and implementation of new laws if the old laws are not sufficient. So, but anyway, but still, the function of the day-to-day function of society requires a repetition of the existing laws in some form or another, in order for people to feel safe, and to have some recourse. So the concept here, though, is that now, and there are other people who think of law as being a inherently oppressive institution. So I'm making claims here that are disputable and that are controversial, but are nevertheless also, there are people who are inconsistent in this regard. In other words, they often see the law, for instance, laws in the United States as being inherently, obviously racist, and also, or parts of them are, or part of the structure of them is, and at the same time, to imagine a no law situation, and this is where my argument is that it means that you are actually um, going to a situation where you have uh, only the strongest oppressing the weak. Okay, so the richest, the most well connected, the most heavily armed. In our society, we have a problem with people being heavily armed with for no good reason. So and also policemen are too heavily armed, and they use their arms too readily, especially when they're dealing with people of color and or other marginalized groups. But anyway, so but this without the concept of that there's some kind of agreement with this, what I'm calling this ethical orientation is a deontological ethics, the saying like we are going to have a legal system and we're going to have a due process of law, and we're going to try to um, push our disagreements through either a legal process if it's a repetition, or a political process if it involves changing laws. And so, and that fundamental agreement is the basis of democracy, and it's also the basis of democratic rule of law. And I think it's the basis of any complex society that is going to be able to face the changing reality of our, you know, biosphere and our economy that we built, that is very dynamic and changes rapidly as well. So and that dynamicism, dynamic dynamicism or dynamism is also creates the need for changes in law, and therefore politics and so forth and so on. So anyway, so this is simply to point out something that when I'm saying this, this might sound entirely reasonable, or to some people it might sound reactionary what I'm saying, but I think this is the realm upon which any much better society is going to be built. Okay, and because of the protections that a legal system gives people, and again, it's also a controversial assertion, because the idea that laws were only invented for capitalists to oppress workers, or slave owners to oppress and slaves, that that idea, I think it's attractive as a form of maybe retrospective analysis, but as a prospective program, I think that it's no accident that laws became more elaborate in constitutions when the rule of absolute monarchs, or just even local fiefdoms, local gangsters essentially, who were the warlords, were becoming regulated in some form or another. So they provided some relief to the less powerful people in society. So while I would agree with the assertion that laws have tended to serve the more powerful, and that the legal system gets operated by the more powerful with more resources to their greater benefit than it does to ordinary people, the lack of any legal system at all would still further benefit the people at the top. And so, or some other more brutal gangster leadership of society. And so instead, what we need to do is figure out how to make sure that laws are democratic, as maximally democratic, and serve the people as best as possible. And I think the experiment that Chile is doing right now with rewriting their constitution is an example of rethinking a legal architecture. And I think that is the way forward. In other words, there's no way around this. even though of all of the negative oppressive history that can be associated with law and with law enforcement, um, that nevertheless we have no uh, route around going through that route and changing it even from the ground up, and even making some fundamental changes there, but still, um, and that requires also, again, surrounding and not just the legal whatever eagles and so forth and so on, and the documents and the technical part, but around that, this society having this orientation, which I'm calling democratic rule of law, which is this ethical orientation to say, let's resolve things this way. And the when we see, though, the contrast, and the reason why I'm saying that this is, even something I'm associating with progressivism and so forth and so on, and is because we see the negative example of uh, uh, people summarily asserting their power, sometimes using guns directly, or even just short-circuiting laws, and also in the case of the Democratic leadership here, not enforcing rule of law as it now exists, and then allowing the Republicans to potentially create a new legal architecture that is anti-democratic. That's not so. There is a potential for a non-democratic rule of law and for a authoritarian rule of law, and so I'm not saying rule of law in and of itself is this sort of positive goal, but certainly democratic rule of law is where we want to go, and it's not. It may not be attractive to you, and make your heart beat faster and make you feel like you want to fight for this, but I feel we really need to fight for it, and right now, actually, we have a crisis in the rule of law in our society, in democratic rule of law, and that both parties are participating in, and both parties are undermining the rule of law in different ways. So anyway, if you have any thoughts about this issue, please please comment below. And also, if you like my presentation here, please like the video. And also, if you're enjoying Politics 2100 more generally, please subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.